All right, so welcome everyone to today's class. Um, so we are still working on CSS. Over the past few classes, we've been talking about CSS, right? Cascading style sheets. And we've done a lot around selectors, talked about specificity, we talked about colors, talked about typography, talked about borders, talked about shadows. We've talked about box model, CSS box model and layout. Um, Currently, we are in responsive web design, responsive web design. So I think what I would do today is I'll just create a new folder. I would like us to work on something new. So let's just say maybe CSS, maybe like CSS class 6, for example, class 6 dots. Okay, so that's a folder. All right, so we can leave it at class 6. Let's leave it at class 6. Inside the folder, let's create just double click or right click, right? Right click on the folder. So let's just create a new file. You want to work with new files today. So let's say index.html. So we are having index.html here. Just to note that this index.html will not conflict with this other index.html that we already have because it is inside a folder, right? So take note of that. It's inside a folder called class 6. And so I can just right click and still create a new file for my styles. Styles.css. Okay, so we are working with something clean. And of course, you always remember the shortcut to spin out our default document structure. So you can type HTML:5, press enter, and it's going to bring this out for you. And what you can do is you can change the title to maybe CSS class 6, or you can say responsive web design. Responsive web design, right? Then in our CSS here, of course, okay, so before then, let's see what we want to type. Okay, so let's link our CSS as usual. To link our CSS. So rel stands for relationship. Style sheets. Style sheets.
Sorry, I can see your screen.
Okay, so all right, so let me share my screen. Sorry about that. Confirm you can see my screen. Okay, all right, great, thanks. So let's start again. Sorry, I wasn't sharing my screen initially. Okay, so just hold on. All right. So what I did was, okay, so I can just delete this. Let's delete this and start again. Move to trash. Okay, so remember we are still in our class 1 folder, right? And of course, we have a couple of codes here that we've been writing over the past few classes. So, but today we want to start on a clean slate, right? So that whatever we are doing would just be very clear. So from class 1 here, which is a folder already, so you just, the first one is new file, right? So you just get to the one that says new folder, which is the second icon after the name of the folder, right? So you just click on it. So we want to say class 6, right? Class 6 folder. So you press enter. Then within class 6 here, you create a new file, right? So you call it your index.html. And so I earlier said that the index.html here will not conflict with the index.html you have here. If you can see, or if you notice, you would see that this class 6 folder has an index.html, and you can see when I hover over the index.html, you can see the paths, right? You see desktop slash class 1 slash class 6 slash index.html. While if you hover over this existing index.html, you can see desktop slash class 1 slash index.html. So that's to tell you that these two HTML files, although they have the same name, they are in different folders. So just to let you know. And we also want to create our styles.css within that class 6. So we could say new file and say styles.css. All right. So in our index.html, of course, remember the default shortcuts for creating your HTML document, which is HTML. You have colon, you have 5, press enter. Then in our title, we can have responsive web design. Then in our CSS, okay, so let's link our CSS here. So let's say link, and within this link, we are going to have a relationship to say that this is a style sheet. And after that, we're going to have our hyperlink reference to say /styles.css. So just to confirm that we've successfully linked our styles.css to our index.html. So let's go to our styles. Let's just style the body tag and see what happens, just to be sure. So we can say background color. So we can say red, maybe red. Then we come to our index.html. We open with live server. Okay, so it shows us that it is red, meaning that we have successfully linked our CSS to our HTML. All right, so let's reverse that. Let's just comment it out. I don't wish to give it a red background. All right. So responsive web design, in our previous classes talking about responsive web design, so I did say that there are a couple of things to look out for in responsive web design. And just to remind us what responsive web design means. So responsive web design means designing your website to be visually appealing in all screen sizes. Right, so I can just type that, though I did that in the last class. So, okay, so responsive, yeah, so responsive web design. Responsive web design is, designing your web page to be visually appealing in all screen sizes. So it doesn't matter the screen size, or it doesn't matter the device that a user is visiting your website with, right? So whether it's a tablet, whether it's a mobile phone, whether it is laptop, whether it's desktop, your website will still be visually appealing, and that's actually very important for users to be able to have a good user experience making use of your website, right? So I talked about a couple of things to look out for in creating responsive web design. I talked about um, I talked about setting, yeah. So I talked about setting your viewports, right? Making sure that your viewport is set. So if you use the shortcut I used in VS Code, that's HTML:5, you would see that it gives us this structure by default, meaning that you have meta name equals to viewport, content is width. So it just tells the browser to take the device width, right? Whatever device that the website is going to be opened on. So the content should just wrap around or should display using the device width, right? The initial scale is 1.0. Just ensure that this line of code on line 5 is actually present in your HTML for responsive web design, right? Secondly, you would look at, so first is setting your viewport. You would also look at, what else? You're also going to look at making sure, right? So you'll make sure that your um, dimensions, right? So you make sure that your dimensions are flexible. In previous videos, I've talked about the different CSS or unit of measurements, right? Or dimensions in CSS where you use that to measure, a certain, should I say size of maybe like padding, for example, width, all those dimensions. So I talked about view width, I talked about view height, I talked about percentage, right? I talked about pixels, talked about talked about REM, right? So you can actually check that out in previous classes that we've had if you were not there. So you make sure that your dimensions are flexible, right? So by making sure that your dimensions are flexible, you would always have to, or you would most likely use dimensions like view width, right? You use view height, you are going to use percentage. So even PX, right? EM, REM. So, but PX is fixed, right? PS is fixed. Immediately you say 500 pixels, then it is 500 pixels. So it doesn't matter how you try to shift the element. Immediately you give it a fixed width to say, or fixed height to say, I want it to be XYZ pixels. That's what it's going to take. So pixels are used for, minimize the use of pixels, especially for containers, right? So let me just put it there to say minimize. So this doesn't mean you're not going to use some pixels at all, but minimize the use of pixels, especially, right? Especially for containers, right? So you can use it for maybe for images, right? You can use it to size image. You can use it for maybe cards, right? You can use it for maybe font size, right? Maybe you want to give font size of 12 pixels or 24 pixels, whatever. You can use that for font size. But when you come to layout, right, talk about containers, parent elements, you would most likely go for um, dimensions that are a bit flexible. Everything is dependent on the um, use case, right? And it also depends on the design. Yeah. So So we also talked about the use of media queries. So media queries. So media queries just gives you that opportunity to, let's say, use of media queries. So media queries gives you the opportunity to define use of media queries. Okay, so which gives the opportunity to define. So with media queries, you are able to define um, define styles for different screen sizes, right? So with media queries, you're able to define styles for different screen sizes. We actually did that in our previous class, so you could always um, check out the video. But we are still going to talk about some other factors to consider in responsive web design. So we also talk about CSS flex, flex box, layouts. Yeah, you can call it a layout. And we also talked about CSS grid, right? Grid layout. Yeah. So, working on all of these, or all these are factors that work together to give you responsive web design, right? Depending on your knowledge of them, depending on your usage, depending on your expertise, right? So just to demonstrate media query, let's still just give one example of media query. Before we go to Flexbox and Grid. We actually did Flexbox in our previous class, but I got a feedback that it will be better to make use of images. Yeah, images are actually going to make more sense in terms of display, in terms of helping someone to understand. So that's why I'm just going a bit backward to look at CSS Flexbox again in this class before we go to Grid. All right. So, but before then, let's do something. Let's just have a div. And within this div, we want to say, so media queries, yeah. So what we want to do is, let's say paragraph, to say maybe this is a paragraph. So we give class to the div, and maybe we can call it media, we can call it media div, because we intend to demonstrate the media queries with it. You can actually give it any name, right? So class, that's for the paragraph. So we can say media P, right? Media P, yeah. Okay, so let's check out what we have. So this is what we currently have. And so let's work with the font size, right? So let's say media P. So let's take media P, right? That's a paragraph. So let's go to our styles, so CSS, to say that's class. So we use a dot and we control V, that's to paste. Then we have our curly brace, right? So here in media P, we want to say font size. Maybe font size should be, so let's make it a bit large. Let's say maybe 60 pixels, right? Okay, 60 pixels. So, okay, so 60 pixels. All right, so am I missing something there? Media P. Okay, class, which is the dots. Okay, so dot media P, font size 60 pixels. Let's see. All right, so I just had to refresh. Okay, so you can do, remember in one of our classes, we did talk about universal styling or the universal selector, right? Which is represented with asterisks. Then you have curly braces. So we can say box sizing, box sizing, box sizing, and we say border box. So what we expect this to do. Okay, so box sizing, border box. So what we expect this to do, okay, so let me delete this body. Make that the first style up there. Okay, so box sizing, border box, padding 0. We don't want any default padding on our web page. Remember I said your browser gives your website some kind of default margin and padding. So immediately you do something like this to say box sizing border box. When you say border box, remember what you just mean is that anything you're going to give, any extra styling that you're going to give to your element that is supposed to actually enlarge it, right? Because by default, the padding adds to the width and also adds to the height, depending if you're adding padding left, right, or you're adding padding top, bottom, or you're just adding a padding. Remember, padding gives space around the content, while margin gives space around the border of the element. Where the border is absent, so the margin just takes the external space. Okay. So when you say box sizing border box, what you just mean is that every other extra styling that should add to the element width should be contained within the width, so that if I give my element 200 pixels and later give it a padding and later give it a border, all of those things like padding and border will be included within that width. You don't want anything extra. So that's what box sizing border box does. And when you say padding 0, it has any default padding. You want to reset, margin, reset. So you can see the effect that this is a paragraph has gone to our top left. But initially when I didn't define this, especially padding 0 and margin 0, let's comment it out. So you can see that by default, your browser would give it some margin and padding, and that's not what you want. You just want to reset everything so that you know that whatever you're working with is really what it is, right? It helps you to be in control. All right, so let's uncomment that. All right. So we are saying font size should be 60 pixels. Font size 60 pixels. So example of application of media query. Remember that this is the syntax at media, right? So at media, so you can say at media screen. Let's start with that. A media screen, and you have your brackets or parentheses. So max width 768 pixels, 768 pixels. So that's like a breakpoint. So what this means is that from 0 pixels to 768 pixels is going to run the command, whatever is contained here, right? So here we had said that the font size of our paragraph should be 60 pixels. So we can say when our website is opened on a screen that is between 0 to 768 pixels, what do we want to happen to the font size? So we say dot media dot media underscore p. So we want to adjust the font size because that font size will be too big for a small screen. So we can say let the font size be so maybe 30 pixels, right? So let's just experiment that. So you are not going to see any change here until you try to inspect, because by inspecting, your browser is going to give you that opportunity, or should I say like a dashboard to test the responsiveness of your website, right? So you can see here that this screen size is 320 pixels. So if we put our cursor and hover here, but let's click on this icon so that we can select, yeah. So you can see, hovering over the paragraph, you can see that our font size is 30 pixels. 30 pixels. So if we take it to something that is beyond 768 pixels, let's see, this is 768. So let's say beyond 768. So this is 1024, right? 1024 pixels. Let's put our cursor. So you can see the fonts on the this dialog box or the drop down box that you can see here. So you can see that font is 60 pixels. Whereas if you come to something around 768, you will see that our font size is 30 pixels. So with media queries, right, you are able to control whatever to say at this screen size, this is how I want it to look like. And so if you still say at media, right, so you can say at media, so you can say mean width, just to show you that you can equally use mean width. Mean width. So maybe you want to apply a styling beyond 768 pixels. So you can say mean width should be maybe 769 pixels, and it should go all the way to max width. Max width should be maybe 10 to 24 pixels. Yeah. So what do we want? So let's also play around with the background color. Let's say initial background color was maybe brown, right? And the text, let's make the text white. Let's make the text, okay, so that's color, right? Color white. So this is the initial. Color is white, background is brown. So we want to say at 0 to 768 pixels, let's make the background color So let's make it black, right? So let's make it black. Color is still white. So you can say color white. So color is still white. Then here, between the screen size, that's from 769 pixels to 1024 pixels. We can say media p. So we can now define the font size to say, let the font size be maybe 50 pixels or 45 pixels, okay? Then we can now give it a different background color to say maybe blue, while the color of the text still remains white. So even though we don't define this color, since it's still white, we can decide we can just leave it. We are not changing the color, so it will remain white. So you don't need to replicate the styles if they are going to be the same. So if you leave it at white, at this screen size is going to be white. At this screen size, it will still remain white, right? So yeah, so that's what we expect. We expect the font size to be 60 pixels background to be brown and white that's by default, right? But within 0 to 768, this is what we expect. 30 pixels background color black, and within 769 to 1024, we expect the font size to increase to 45 pixels and the background color to be blue. So let's check that out. Okay, so let's start from the smallest screen. All right, so we have background color is black. So that's because it's this 320 pixels, right? So that's what we expect. 425 still black, 768 black, 1024 it has turned to brown, and the font size has changed. Then if we now leave it full screen, so I think we defined three. Let me see, black, blue. Okay, so we've not seen blue. So blue was supposed to show between 769 and 1024. Okay, so let's go back. I want to see that blue. Okay, so 1020, this 1024. So let's reduce this. Okay, so that didn't work. So that was 769 pixels, and max width 1024. We said media p. Okay, so you can see I there's a typo here. So these are some of the little things that you know we face during coding, right? So media, it was supposed to be media, so but it was MEDA. So that's why for styling, right, you can decide to copy. So what I should have just done here, if I wanted to do it, to just copy, right? You've already defined the style and it's working, so you can just copy it. Then when you come after the media syntax here, you just drop it and you paste, right? Come here again and you paste so that there'll be no mistakes, or so, but I didn't do that, and yeah. So, but you can see I've corrected the typo and it's actually working. So you are going to have background color of black, it's still 425, but beyond 768, right? If you stretch it a bit, you see that the background color changes to blue. Then if you now get to 1024 upwards, let's go a bit above 1024. Yeah, so it changes to brown. So short demonstration of a media query. So we talk about CSS flexbox now. CSS flexbox. So as wonderful as this looks, right? This looks nice and is good. Of course, you use media queries to define different stylings for different screen sizes. But one of the things that really helps for layouts, right? Layouts is that's responsive layout is CSS flexbox and CSS grid, right? So we'll start with the flexbox, to demonstrate. So with flexbox, if you understand flexbox and know it very well, it will reduce the use. It will reduce the use of this, right? The use of media queries. So you can use flexbox, and depends on your expertise with it, you can reduce a lot of media queries in your code. But if you cannot really utilize CSS flexbox, then you're actually going to have a lot of media queries. So CSS flexbox was introduced for to add or to reduce the use of stuffs like position, right? So position where you say left or right, or position floats, right? Floats. So these two styles exist in CSS. So, but with the advent of CSS Flexbox, so it actually reduces the use of position and float. So it just gives a beautiful combination that reduces the use of position and float, right? So just to give an example, so let's say div, which is like a container, and within that div, let's have, so we are going to have a paragraph, or let's say we are going to have heading H1, we are going to have a paragraph, and we're also going to have an image. So let's make use of an image to make this example more interactive. Yeah. So let's say heading 1. Let's type something there so we can just say this is heading 1. For example, this is heading 1 paragraph. We can say this is a flex paragraph, right? Then under our image, so let's actually look for an image. I don't wish to bring in an image here for the purpose of this class, but you can download your own image and use. So what I intend to do is just to go online to just get a random image, right? And image, I don't know, any image. I just want to get a random image, copy the image address. So let's see, maybe something like this. So let's just right click. So you can see copy image address, copy. So in our image, you can say SRC, which stands for source. So we can drop it there, Control V. That's quite long. So that's why I have this. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so this is quite long. So let's Control Z for now. So let me just type the alt first. Alt, what image is this? I copied this. So this is the image of a photographer or someone filming a highway. So I can just say a picture of someone, or someone filming the highway. So I can just do that. So I'm going to paste the SRC. So when I paste the SRC, it's actually going to be long. Yeah, so at least we are going to have our first div. Okay. So this, I've pasted it. Okay. So I pasted it within the SRC, remember. So if we go to our website, webpage, so you can see we have that image. We have heading 1, we have flex, we have that image. So let's do this for let's do this for up to maybe 5. Let's do this for up to 5 images so that we'll be able to perfectly demonstrate what we're talking about. So let's grab this one, copy image address, go back to our code. So this is our div. Let's collapse. Okay, so this is it. So after this, we want to have another div, and here, let's say still H1, right? So still H1 to say this is the second heading. Okay, so that's H1. Then we also have a paragraph, paragraph to say this is the second, this is second flex paragraph, right? Then here we are going to have an image, img. Yeah, so the SRC. So we'll drop it there. I believe it's going to be long also. So, but let's type the alt. Okay, so let's check what kind of image is this. This is the image of, so we can just say vegetation. Yeah, we can just say an image of vegetation. Image, or we can say the image of a tree. we can see the image of a tree in a vegetation with a blue sky, an image of a tree in a vegetation with a blue sky. All right, so we are going to drop the URL for this image. Okay, so let's do this. So we actually have two. Let's check it out. So you can see two. So I want to have up to 5. So what I'm going to do is I'll just replicate these images so that we'll have them. I'll replicate these divs, right? I would replicate them like maybe twice so that we have plenty of them. So what I would just do is let me come here. So now we have two divs, right? 1 and 2. So let me copy the 2 and create an extra 2. So let's Control V. So be mindful of this. Let's take this out. Okay. So this is the second one. Yeah. Okay. So we now have 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4. Okay. So let's go for 2 more. Okay. So let's delete this. Collapse. Collapse. So I think we should have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So 6. Okay. So you actually have 6. So to demonstrate Flexbox, so let's see. So all of these are in a div, right? Each of them have their own div. So, but what I want to do is I want to put all of them in a parent div where I'll be able to control the layout. So I'm putting all of them. So we start from, before the first div, right? And at the end of the last div, so we actually give a closing div. So what we can do is let me press Ctrl S so that I can format for me. So you can see the hierarchy that there is a div here. This is the counterpart, right? Or this is the second, the second pair. And all these divs are inside as children. Please take note of this. So they're inside as children. 6 divs within a parent div. So this parent div, I can give it an ID to style it. I can say maybe flex container. Flex container. So flex container. Let's go here before our media queries. So that's an ID. So we say hash flex FLEX container. All right. So in our flex, okay, so we even have a typo. Flex container. So what do we want to do? Just to show you how display flex works. So for display flex, you have to give the parent container display of flex. If you want to apply, okay, so let me just drop it here as a comment to say, so to apply the flexbox, let's just say flexbox property, right? So you need to make the parent container, very important, the parent container to display flex. This is what you need. Make sure that the parent container is set to display flex. That's the only way you can, harness the power of CSS Flexbox. So just to remind us again, going back to the index.html, this is the parent, right? This div with ID of flex container. Every other thing within this div or every other div within this div is actually a child. Take note. So that's why for the parent, we give it display, right? Display. So we say display should be flex, right? So the default behavior of flex is that it's going to make everything align from left to right. And this is what you can see, right? So everything aligns from left to right by default. Sorry, let me this para, let's comment it out. I really don't want it to let me just comment it out for now so that there will be no, yeah, everything will just be clear. All right. So you can see by default, right? Everything immediately you say display flex. Remember, you give display flex to the parent. So immediately you say display flex, everything is going to line up from left to right. Or you could equally say by default, it is the flex direction. By default, flex direction is row, right? Flex direction is row. Okay, so let me just show you what I mean. Going to our styles.css. So if we come here, display flex, so if we come here to say flex direction, so I said it is row by default, right? Row. So if you look at it, everything still remains. There's no change, even though you reload, no change. So, but if you come here and change the flex direction from row to column, so you are going to see it's going to stack from top to bottom. That's what column does. It stacks it from top to bottom, right? So let's beautify. Let's just beautify this each of our child elements. Let's just give it a little bit of beauty. So how do we do that? So we say ash. We can say ash flex container. So we target the child. Of course, the children are divs, so we target the child or the children to say border border. So let's give it some border to say maybe 2 pixels solid brown, 2 pixels solid brown. Then what do we want to give? We want to give some margin. Just give some margin to say maybe 10 pixels. Then border radius. So remember what border radius does, that it gives a kind of curve, you know, curve style to the border at the edges, right? That's top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. So border radius, so you can just say maybe 20 pixels, just for you to have a little curve. So let's see. So this is what you have, right? Here's what you have. So let's give a little padding so that it will make everything to position inside. Let's give a little padding. All right, so let's say padding, maybe 20 pixels. So let's see. All right. So you can see that padding just pushes everything inside, gives you some space around the content. So another thing we can do is I'm still designing this card, right? I've not, we are talking about display flex, but I'm just trying to make this card look a little bit nice so that we can work with it. All right. So what else? Let's give it a width and height. Width, let's give it a width of say 150 pixels, 150 pixels. Then let's give it a height of 400 pixels. Yeah. So let's see. Okay, so it's actually smaller than the image. So so let's increase the width a bit to say, okay, so let's make it 450. 450. Okay. 450 pixels. Um, let's see. Let's make it 350. Let's see how 350 looks. Okay. So we could even reduce it to say 320. Okay, so I think this, okay, so this one is outside. All right, so let's use 350. Okay, so let's use 350. I think that's fine. Okay, so we are assuming that we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, these are flex items, right? So um flex direction is column. So I'm just showing you what you can use flex for. You can actually use flex for using flex is going to reduce the use of position and float. In fact, with flex, you won't even use position, you won't use float. What else is actually going to help you for responsiveness, right? So yeah, so we are still demonstrating. Flex direction, of course, is self-explanatory. When we gave it column, it made everything to stack from top to bottom. Right. Then what else? So we have but let's make it row. Let's make it row, ROW, because I want to show you something. Row. Okay, so row is going to make it from left to right. So but so take note of the first image. So the first image is this one, where someone is filming a highway. So if in the flex direction row, maybe we have row reverse. So we can have row reverse. So you can see when you say row reverse, we can't even see what is it pushes everything, it turns the whole thing around, right? This, can you see that this was towards our far left? Is now what is displaying on our far right. This is heading 1, this particular one, right? Is what is now displaying on our far right, because we have said the row should reverse. So it will still be on the row from left to right, but what was at the first position is going to come to the last, and what was at the last is actually going to change position to the first. So to better demonstrate this, let me do something. Let me give each of these numbers. So that's actually going to make sense for me or for us. So this is heading 1. So let's go to the second one to say this is heading 2. Okay, so we can say this is heading 2. Let's number them. This is heading 2, right? So let's go to the next one to say this is heading 3. And let's go to the next one to say this is heading 4. Heading 4. Let's go to the next one. This is heading 5. And finally, this is heading 6. Okay, so I've numbered them 1 to 6. All right, so you can see. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it has changed, right? So if we go to our code, to our styles, to say only row, you're going to see just row. So you can see it starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So just to let you know, but there's a problem. There's a problem with our web page, because as you can see, the user has to scroll from left to right. So just imagine this is maybe someone opens it on a mobile. Let's say mobile. So this is how it's going to look. It doesn't it doesn't give a good user experience that on your website somebody has to be scrolling from left to right on whatever screen size. It doesn't give a good user experience. So what do you want to do? You want to say flex wrap, flex wrap. So by default, flex wrap property is no wrap. So if you say no wrap, nothing changes. Look at it, no wrap, right? So the element does not wrap. So, but when you say wrap, if you change from no wrap to say wrap, you see. So automatically, what wrap does is that if there is an excess of that particular element that is a flex item. So flex is just like flexible, right? If there is an excess to the left or to the right, when you ask the container or the parent to wrap, it's going to wrap every of its child, items or element to stack on top of each other. That's when the space becomes, you know, um, exhausted, right? The initial space becomes exhausted. It's actually going to, go down. So if you see, let's expand this gradually. So you will see what happens. So can you see by default, depending on the screen size, it is going to just align itself, right? So you don't need to use media queries to say from 0 pixels to 778, do like this. From 778 to this, do like this, you understand? Except you want to play with this font size, for example. Maybe the font size here is too big on a screen, on a mobile, right? So let's say mobile around here, maybe around here, 395 or 320, right? So maybe for this, you feel that, oh, this font size is too big. So you can actually work on the font size. That's when you can bring in media query. And that media query will just be to target, you are just reducing the font size. That's what you are doing. But for the positioning of these elements, using Flexbox is going to give it a default, it's going to give it a good positioning. You understand? By default. No matter the screen size. So, but I see something here. So you can even see that the width of the box or the boxes is actually responsive. So everything is just wrapping. Can you see that where you have this is heading 1. So as you keep shrinking it, that one stacks, that one goes to the next line, and it keeps reducing, as you increase, right? You see. So you see how your website behaves by default. You can even see this is how it looks like because we've asked it to wrap. So this heading 4, right? This heading 4 cannot stay here because there won't be enough space for this your heading 4, right? So because of that, it comes to the next line by default. So, but another thing, okay, just looking at it, you can see that we have a little space to the left and so much space to the right. That's for, laptop or desktop, right? And you just want it to, maybe you want to play around with the positioning. Remember I said that positioning and float, it's CSS Flexbox eliminates positioning and float. So let's say you want everything to be evenly, like you want sufficient space around it. You want it to spread around this web page. So there are two properties called justify content. Justify content. So what does justify content do? So justify content has a lot of values, So it helps to justify the flex items from left to right. That's what justify content does. So let me just drop it here as a comment to say justify. So justify content actually justifies or position. So we can use another word. So it actually positions the flex items. It positions the flex items from left to right. Right? While I'm still going to put a value for this. So let's comment it first. While we have align items, right? So align. So what does align items do? So align items positions, yeah. So you can say positions the flex items from top to bottom, right? So while one is for the x-axis, which is horizontal, that's from left to right. The other one is for the y-axis, that's from, top to bottom. So justify content. So you're going to see, so there are a lot of values here. So let's just say, let's start and say, so flex starts. So if we say flex starts, so by default, right, your flex items are justified flex starts by default. So this is how it looks. So if you say, instead of flex start, you say flex end, what happens? So you can see it automatically pushes everything to the far right. And even when you inspect, let's inspect, you'll see that it will favor the right direction anywhere there is space. So this one, why you're not seeing, you can't see much difference is because it's mobile. So everything just fits in. But if you start to enlarge this, you're going to see that it's going to favor the right. Can you see? It favors the end of the flex. It favors the right. So, yeah. So, but for mobile, 320 pixels, you may not really notice any difference. But as you continue, as the screen size increases, you're actually going to see what that does. All right. So that's flex end. So justify content. So we also have space around. So space around gives the flex items even space around gives, let's see. So you can see here, let's read here. Flex items are evenly distributed in the line with half size spaces on either end. That's to the left and to the right. So it's going to give even spaces within the element, but to the edges, that's to the far left and to the far right, it's going to be half the sizes. So let's say space around. So can you see what we are saying here is that the space between here, where my cursor is, to here is the same thing, the same space between here and here. That's what we are saying. Then the space from the beginning of your browser to this place, to the first element here, is half this space. That's what space around is. And at the ending here, after this is heading 3, from here down to the edge is half of what is in between them. Right. So if you inspect, let's also inspect and see. Let's shrink so you can see. Yeah, so it's important to know what each of these styles do So that's space around. So there's another one for space between. Between. So space between is that it's not going to give spaces to the edges, to the left and right, but it's going to give space in between them. So of course you can see. So it depends on what you want, right? It depends on the kind of design you want. You can choose whatever you want. So it doesn't give space to the far left, it doesn't give space to the far right, but it gives space to, in between the elements. Okay, so that's space between. Then you can check space evenly. Of course, from the name, space evenly just means that it's going to give even spaces from the beginning to the end, from the far left to the far right, space evenly. So if this is what you want to achieve. So here you can see. So if you did not use display flex and you want to move this element from here to here, you would most likely give it a margin, right? That's what you would say. You just say, oh, margin left. You can say margin left. Maybe you give it a certain pixels. Here, you come and you say margin right. You give it a certain pixels. But the question is, when you inspect and you are going to open that same website on a smaller screen, remember you still have that margin left and margin right. So it means that you now need to go to media query to go and define and say, okay, for smaller screens, if that margin left was too much, maybe it was maybe like 20, 25 pixels. It means you now need to go to media query and say margin left, maybe reduce it to like 10 pixels or 8. The margin right, make it 10 or 8 pixels. So actually that's actually going to take a lot of your time, and so much code is involved. So but if you master CSS Flexbox and you understand all of these things, it's actually going to give you an edge, right? And you will not have to, trouble yourself a lot. So that's justify content. So if you now say align items, and you say, okay, so there's another one, yeah, before I come here. So space evenly, I think there is center. Let me see, center. Okay, so there is center, yeah. So if you also want everything to come very close to each other, you can give it justify content center. So it's going to squeeze from left to right. It's going to squeeze everything into the middle. So this is because I had given it, I think I gave it a margin. If I didn't give it a margin, everything is going to collapse to each other, right? Let me see. So this is what I mean. I gave it a margin of 10 pixels. So if I comment out this margin, do you see? Everything is actually going to collapse to each other. So if this is what you want, this is actually how to achieve it. And if you inspect, how does it behave on smaller screens? So you're going to see. So because we've removed the margin, let me reload. Okay. So because we've removed the margin, you can see it doesn't look nice. So that's why we put that margin, so that it's going to give us space between each of these guys. So let's Control Z. Yeah, so let's see. Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah. So that's center, right? So I've shown you the different so what I can do is, let me just say, so we have space between, we have space around, we have space evenly, we have center, we have flex starts, we have flex end, right? So it's just important to know what each of these does, right? But I would like to leave it at space evenly. Let me leave it as space evenly. Yeah. So align items, we are here. Let's just also demonstrate. So align item center. So let's see. Okay, this just to remind us how this is how it looks like at the moment. This is space evenly. This is how it looks like at the moment. So let's go. Let's try to align the items. So let's say center. How does it look? So it aligns it from top to bottom. You may not really see center. So where let me see. You may not really see. Okay, so if we comment out center, let me check something. Okay, so there's actually a difference, I guess, but not much. So this is how it is by default. It's showing that it's at the center. But if you how do we demonstrate this? Okay, so what I can do is to show this. Let me comment out this. Let me comment out some divs here. Let it just be maybe 2. Yeah, let it just be 2. So that you will see how the align item center works. Yeah, so let me go to our index.html. So this is first one, this is the second one. Yeah, so this is the third. And let's say, let's comment it. Okay, so yeah, we're stopping here. Yeah. So yeah, so I've commented 3 or 4 out of 6. Okay, so let me see. I expect it to be at the center. Let me see. Let's see something. Okay, so I had commented out the center. Yeah. So why is it not working? Oh, okay. So this is one of the things around align items. So if you don't give it a height, right? You need to give the container a height for it to work. If you don't give the container a height, the align items property for a flex for flex items will not work, or for flex box will not work. So you need to give it height. It's only when you give it height, because you know that it's justifying or is trying to position the content from top to bottom. So you need to specify the height to tell it that, oh, this is the boundary, this is the top, and this is where it stops. So it will be able to calculate the center. But if you do not give it a height, it will not be able to calculate the center. So let's go and give a height to our container. So let's say height property. Let's just say 100 view height. So remember that by saying 100 view height, you are telling the browser to take the full, like, more like, so look at it. So this is 100 view height. 100 view height is just everything you can see. That's viewport height. That's what it means. Your display here, right? Everything on your browser display or your browser window is actually VH. That's viewport height. That's from top to bottom now. But if you now say VW is viewport width. So it's from your far left down to your far right. So can you see that these elements have come to the middle from top to bottom? Because we gave it a height. Remember, if you don't give it a height property, the align items will not work. Okay, so you can see how the align items work. It pushes it, it pushes elements from top to bottom and positions it where you want it to. All right, so let's see. Align item center. So what else? So okay, so flex. So it also has flex end. You can see flex end is going to bring it down, to the bottom of the parent, because we had said 100 view height, so it's going to bring it down. If we say flex start, of course it will take it up. Yeah, take it up. Yeah. So, but let's leave it at let's leave it at maybe center. Let's leave it at center. Okay, so yeah, I needed to also demonstrate how does it work. Let me inspect, yeah. So this flex start, let's also inspect. You can see, so it will still hang up, right? To still hang up. If we say flex end, END, you may not really see the difference because this is mobile, right? And the height is not increasing more than this. So you may not really see the difference because it's aligning it from top to bottom, remember? Let me see. So, but let me see if I can. Can I increase the height? Let me see. It doesn't work. So, but at least I've been able to demonstrate what flex starts, flex end does. Then center. Let me see, center. So you may not really see a difference because it's aligning it from top to bottom. But for justify, at least you saw it from left to right. Yeah. So this is it. Okay, so that's flex. That's flex. So just to pause here to check up if there are any concerns, questions, or something. If not, we'll just move to grid. All right, so we'll move to CSS grid to also demonstrate. Okay, so let's do this. So we are still going to use, we are going to use the same, okay, so let me see. Are we going to use this? Okay, so let's use the same container that we have here. So but what we want to do here, let's change this to grid. Instead of flex container, let's change it to grid container. To say grid, right? Grid container. So let's see what happens. I would have to uncomment this so that we have, let me uncomment it. Yeah. So let's see what we have. So for grid, right? You need to by default, okay, so for grid, yeah. So for the parents, you need to make it display grid. Display grid. So let's go. So remember that we've changed the ID to grid container. So this flex container will no longer work because we don't have any elements with flex container. So just take notes. Then coming down, we have hash grid underscore container. So they work almost the same way, but it depends on the one that's, after learning the two, you'd be able to know which one is more comfortable or, depending on the use case. So this is the container. Okay, so let's give display of grid. Display grid. So what happens? So by default, nothing happens, right? So you are the one that will now choose, okay, how do you want to do it? So let's go. So display grid. So we have what we call grid template columns. Grid template columns. So with grid template columns, right, you are able to define, okay, so I think let me make a little note here to say, okay, so with grid template columns, let me just copy it so that to save some time. With grid template columns, you are able to you are able to define, right, to define the number of columns. So that's what grid template columns does. It helps you to define the number of columns, yeah, and their sizes, right, and their sizes. That's what grid template columns will help you to do. So grid template columns, so you can say auto. Let's say you want to have like 3 columns. Okay, let's start with 2. Okay, so by default, it is auto, right? By default, it is auto. Look at it. No change. So what if you say auto 2 times? Auto, auto. So it means you need 2 columns, right? When you say auto, auto, it means you need 2 columns. But this is not responsive by default, right? It's not responsive by default. I'm going to show you the responsive part of this. So if you inspect, you see how ugly it looks. It doesn't look nice. It's more like the two are kind of collapsing to each other. It doesn't look nice. So, yeah. So auto, auto. So if you say auto, 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 maybe 3 times, it gives it 3 columns, right? It gives it 3 columns. And if you even make it 4, it gives it 4. Right? So, but the question is, if you have, let's say you want to have 8 columns. So the question is, are you going to keep typing auto, auto, auto? You know, you just keep typing auto into 8 places. So there's actually a shortcut. Yeah. There's a shortcut here where you can say grid. We are still talking about grid template column. So you can say repeat. Right? Repeat. So inside the repeat, the question is how many columns? You say maybe 4 columns. How do you want it? Maybe 1 FR. So FR stands for fraction. Let me type it here to say FR stands for fraction. Right? FR stands for fraction. So what this means is that you need 4 columns, and you want the 4 columns to have the same size. So you say 1 fraction. So that means whatever width that the parent container has, just give me a fraction of each. So it's going to give you something equal. I'm going to demonstrate something to show you. So it gives you 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. And at the same time, all of them have the same dimension. But if you come here and say, let me see. Let's say you give it a width. Okay, so let's now specify a width. So if we say width of maybe 700 pixels, for example. So how does this look? So these 700 pixels, right? And these 4 columns. But these 4 columns, so when you say fraction, it is just like saying 700 pixels divided by 4. So it goes 1 fraction, 1 fraction, 1 fraction, 1 fraction, right? So it makes all of them to have equal dimension. That's what 1 FR or FR does, fraction. But now let's remove this width. Let it go back to its normal position. So if we want to say 2, let 2 have 1 fraction, but let the remaining 2, let 2 have 1 fraction, but let the remaining 2 have 2 fractions. Let's see what happens. Okay, so what are we seeing here? So this is column 2. Yeah, so this order to have 2 fractions. So what you can see here is that column 1, this column 1 that says this is heading 1. This is the second column that says this is heading 2. These two columns have taken 1 fraction. Now you come to the next, which is this is heading 3, and this is heading 4. These two, this is heading 3 and this is heading 4, have taken their own 2 fractions each of the entire width. Yeah. So that's really what this stands for. Repeats. You want it to repeat how many times? You define the number of times. So this first argument stands for the number of times you want it to repeat, while the second one has to do with the sharing. How do you want the columns to be in terms of the size? So you can, if you like, right? Let's come here to say, if you like, you can come here to say, if you want it to be a fixed width, maybe you want it to be a fixed width. You want to define a fixed width. So you can say repeat, and maybe you want it to be 3 columns. Then fixed width, you can give it a fixed width and say maybe 100, or no, let's say 200 pixels. So what that means is that you're going to have 3 columns of 200 pixels each. So this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3. It's not looking nice because if let's bring in the gap property, gap. Let's bring in the gap property so that it will look nice. So let's say gap. So we can give it, if we say 20 pixels, if we give it just one value, it's going to give okay, so just hold on. Is there anything affecting this styling? Giving it a height. Okay, so this does not apply. Okay, so let's see. Repeat 3, 200 pixels. Okay, so let's say 20 pixels, 20 pixels. Let's see. Okay, so let me try this. Maybe let's say column gap. Okay, so column gap, maybe 20 pixels. Okay, so this is not working as expected. Let's check out, let's try to inspect and see. Oh, okay. So I know why it's not working. Yeah. So let's target the children. We've not targeted the children, remember. All what we are doing is within the container. So let's target the children to say ash grade underscore container. Let's target the children. So all the divs inside. Okay, so can we give it a gap now? Let's see. Gap of 20 pixels. Let's see. Does that work? Okay, so let me see. Okay, so let's go back. Just hold on. Let me try to fix this. Let's go back to this auto where we had 4. Okay. Let me see 4. Okay, so let's see the gap, maybe gap of 40 pixels. Okay, so let's let me open up column gap 20 pixels. Let's increase it to like 50 pixels. I want to see a significant change. Did I see a significant change? Okay, so let's try row. row gap. Let's make it maybe 50 pixels. C. Okay, 50 pixels. So you can see um, it shifted the items, right? This is row. So you know row is from um, so the way it works, right, is as where my cursor is, right? So from top going down, as though you are going down, is more like the row, right? So, but when you look at each of these are columns, right? From here, okay, so you have X and Y axis, right? You have something coming from up to down, which is vertical, and you have something from left to right, which is horizontal. So if you want to actually look at the row, the way that the row works, let me see. Let me comment the column. So let's know it's only row. Okay. So the row actually gave space, right, between the up and down, right? It works from top to bottom. While the column is actually going to work from left to right. So it's important to know row will work, whatever dimension you give for row is going to work from top to bottom, while the column is going to work from left to right. So for the row, if you even increase it to say, maybe instead of 50 pixels, you say maybe 250 pixels, for example. So do you see it will further push it down. But for the column, if you say, let's make the column 250 pixels and see. 250. Column gap, 250 pixels. So do you see? You have separated it from left to right. So that's what column gap does. It helps you to specify the gap for your column, while the row helps you to specify the gap for your row. Okay, so 250 is too much, so let's make it maybe like let's go back to 50. Let's make the row 250. I think that's okay. Or let's make it 150. Okay. All right, so this is column gap and row gap, but there is a shorthand property for the gaps, right? There's a shorthand property where you can just say gap, just gap alone. So I think first is the row, so 150 pixels, 50 pixels. So let's comment out these two. Comments. So you see, it still takes it's a shorthand for like row. First stands for row and second stands for column. So you can just use in one line of code, you can be able to define the row gap and the column gap, right? Then let's see. But if you want to make, if we check this our web page is not responsive. It's not responsive. It's not, because somebody is still able to scroll from far left to right. And that's not what we want to achieve. We want it to be responsive, right? Because we don't want to go to media queries to start doing a lot of styling. So, but if we want this to be responsive by default, what we are going to do is we are going to work on the grid template columns if we want it to be responsive. So let me comment out this guy and let me type a new grid template column, maybe here, to say grid templates columns. So let's have repeats, yeah, repeat. But within the repeats, we want to say autofill. So auto dash fill, comma. We want to make it responsive, and this is actually how to do that. Then we have min max. and within our min max, we can now say we want it to be 3 columns and we want 1 fraction. Okay. So is this what we expected? Let me see. We want it to repeat. Autofill min max 3. Let me see. Let's say 200 pixels. Right? Okay, so we have coming from top to bottom. Okay, so let's check it out. Gap 150 pixels. Let's take out this gap. Okay, so everything comes like this. All right. So next is to define at this point, right, where we have said autofill min max 200 pixels. So what we mean here is that give us 3 columns, right? Give us 3 columns and let each of them be 200 pixels minimum. That's what we mean. But at the same time, we also want a situation where if it appears on a smaller screen size, those columns will be able to come down, right? So what we can do is let's still go here. So where we have our grid template columns, repeat. Okay, so let's uncomment our gap, right? Let's uncomment our gap, and let me see. So let's target the children. Okay, let's target the children. Okay, so let me just make a quick reference there. I think I'm missing out something. Let me see. Grid, templates, columns. Okay, so let's check it out. Okay, so I'm trying to get something. Grid, let me see. Grid template columns. Okay. So let's see. This is auto. Okay, so I think, let me see. Just give me a moment. Okay, so let's go to this place. Just hold on. Let's see something here. Okay. Okay, so let's see. So instead of 3, let's see it maybe like 200 pixels here. And here let's have 1 FR. Let's see. Okay, so I actually made a mistake. Yeah, so what I did, I had put the FR, like the number of columns in the first argument before the pixels, right? So what I just did was this is what I had before. Let's Control Z, Z, Z. Yeah, this is what I had before. Yeah, so I had 3 here, then I had 200 pixels. So, but this is what I have now. I just have that 200 pixels. Let's take out the 200 pixels. So I brought the 200 pixels here. So this place actually stands for the size, right? Then here is fraction. Okay, so 1 FR. So when I do this, it actually, yeah, brings everything from left to right. And if I inspect, let me inspect. Okay, so you can see this is what I wanted to achieve. Yeah, so you can see by inspecting, everything lines up from top to bottom. So it becomes responsive. Can you see? So as you switch between screen sizes, automatically just, it becomes responsive. Yeah. So this is for responsiveness. Let me make a special, let me comment there. So this line of code makes the grid items, yeah? Grid items responsive, yeah. So this is actually very important. This line of code, it makes it responsive because you are saying autofill. Because you are putting autofill here, it's going to automatically, and you give it a min max. Within the min max, you say you want it to be 200 pixels for each of the columns, and you want each of those columns to take one fraction. Then at this point, yeah, okay. So what else do I want to check? Okay, so grid column starts. I think that will be the last for our class today. Grid column starts, grid column end, grid row starts, and grid row end. So what do I mean? Let's practicalize it. So let's say, for example, right, we want this first grid item to take 2 spaces. You want it to take 2 spaces out of what every other person is taking, or what every other grid item is taking. How do you do that? Let's see. So let's come here to say grid. So what you can do is you have to single that particular grid item out, right? You have to single it out. So for example, if you want just this first grid item to take like 3 spaces, you want this first grid item to take like 3 spaces out of the entire space. So you have to single this first one out and apply that style on that singular one so that it will take whatever space you've asked it to take. So in order to do that, you have to go to our index.html, right? And give it an ID because we want to target just that one. So we need to give it an ID. It doesn't have an ID at the moment. So let's give it an ID so that we can target only that one. So we can say grid item 1, right? Grid item 1. Okay, so let's say grid item 1. That's an ID. So let's go to our stars.css to say hash. Then we drop it there. And so what do we want to say? We want to say grid column starts. Grid column starts. So you can say 3. So you can say, okay, so let's say 1. Then end. You also define where to end. Grid column end. So you can say maybe 3. So what you are saying is that just take you had put it in like boxes, right? You had up to like think 4 or 5 rows. So what you are trying to say is that give me the first 3, make the first box or the first grid item to occupy the first 3 spaces. That's what you're saying. Yeah, so you can, let me see, yeah. Okay, no, not first 3, sorry. So when you say 1, 3, it's like between the first and the third, meaning that it's going to occupy 2 spaces, right? So when you say 1 and 3, it's actually going to occupy 2 spaces, not 3. So just like more like subtract 1 from 3. You will have to. So it's going to take 2 spaces. If you say 4, it's going to take 3 spaces. 4. It's going to take 3 spaces. But why is this not shifting, enlarging here? I think we had given these items width and height. Okay, so let me give it a background color. Yeah. I think that's what will make us to really see it well. So let's say background color. Background color of anything will make us see it. Maybe blue. So you can see with the background color, it shows us that this grid item has taken this entire width. So it has taken 3 spaces. These other ones just take 1 each, but this one alone has taken up to 3, right? So if we go back to our code and change it from 4 to say 3, you see it takes 2, right? Yeah. So same thing you can do with okay, yeah, thanks. So I will soon yeah, so I'll end soon, yeah. So same thing we can do with the row, right? Grid row starts and grid row end. Let's replicate that. So let's say start at 1 and end grid row end. Grid row end. So start at 1 and end at maybe 3. So it's actually also going to take 2 spaces. So you can see it takes 2 spaces from top to bottom when you say the grid row start and end, So to the right, when you say grid column starts and end. So so with the background color, you've been able to see it. All right. So I think we'll stop here.